As they watched, the Doctor's face began to change. The silver hair began to curl up and vanish. The cloak that covered the Doctor shifted, though the Doctor was obviously neither conscious nor moving. Was this the end? Then incredibly the changes began to show. First, the skin settled down. It was no longer pale and transparent, but almost tanned and thicker. The silver hair was gone completely. In its place was a shock of jet black hair. The familiar lines in the Doctor's face were gone, and fewer lines now marked the visage that Ben stared into. It was no longer the Doctor who lay on the floor before them, but a very different man. Despite it being reported in the newspapers, many people, especially Doctor Who's core audience of young people, were astonished and upset, but nevertheless quite excited when, on the 23rd of October 1966, the irascible but kind-hearted old adventurer they had welcomed into their living rooms and their hearts for 3 years suddenly collapsed, seemingly on the brink of death, only to reform into the body of a younger and altogether shabbier man.
His hair, look at it!
He's breathing. The TARDIS seems to be normal.
Ben, what are we going to do? We can't just leave the Doctor there.
But him? The Doctor?
Well, that's who came through the doors. There was no one else outside. Ben, do you remember what he said in the tracking room? Something about this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
So he gets himself a new one?
Well, yes.
Do me a favour.
It was a major gamble on the part of producer Innes Lloyd. Parts had been recast before, but to have the lead character transform into a completely new person as part of the narrative was a stroke of genius that is perhaps taken for granted today after so many of what would become known as regenerations. His immediate predecessor, John Wiles, had had an idea to recast the role, but with a similar actor playing the same incarnation. The decision to renew the Doctor's entire form into someone with not only a markedly different physical form, but personality as well, was pretty unprecedented.
Here, Doctor. You completed your examination?
Yes, just about.
Turned the base upside down, poked into everything?
Yes, clothes, boots, food.
And you found?
Absolutely nothing.
Just as I thought.
Oh, thank you.
So what I told you still stands.
After some debate, established character actor Patrick Troughton was offered the role, a choice which Hartnell reportedly approved of. There's only one man in England who can take over, and that's Patrick Troughton. Born in 1920, Troughton was drawn to acting and performance from an early age, taking parts in school productions and later attending acting school before joining a repertory company. Like most of his generation, the Second World War interrupted his ambitions, and he served as an officer with the Royal Navy, spending most of the war patrolling the coastline in gunboats based at my old stomping ground, Great Yarmouth. Because of the cold, Troughton took to wearing a tea cosy on his head, an anecdote which wonderfully recalls the eccentricity he would bring to the Second Doctor. After the war, Troughton returned to his love of acting, and in the years leading up to his casting in Doctor Who, he built up an impressive CV, appearing in several film and TV programmes, notably as the first televisual Robin Hood, something which appears as a little Easter egg in a later Doctor Who episode.
Better wander. A knight, you say? Walking through the forest. He has no horse and comes alone. One of our fellows spied him. Or no men-at-arms or followers with him?
Oh, yes, I love it. I love the variety. I've always done wildly different parts. I started in the sort of classical vein with the Bristol Old Vic and then the Robert Donat Company in London and at the Mercury Theatre doing T.S. Eliot plays and all that. And I got a very good grounding and all that sort of thing. But then I got into television, which was the very early days, 1948, when it was all live, you know, terror. And I got a chance up there of playing every sort of part under the sun. Goodies, baddies, costume, modern, everything. And It was a small audience, about 300,000 in those days, only in London. Look at it now. Look at it now.
It was his versatility which endeared him to Lloyd, and his casting clearly shows that the intention was always to have the new Doctor be markedly different from his original incarnation. Mercifully, it is Sidney Newman who we have to thank in part for ensuring that the new Doctor was not too markedly different. Troughton originally considered playing the part as a blacked-up turban-wearing pirate, much like Conrad Veidt in The Thief of Baghdad. Newman suggested that the new Doctor be reminiscent of Charlie Chaplin's most famous creation, the Tramp. Upon seeing the initial costume and makeup tests, Newman reportedly exclaimed, "Hey fellas, what you doing to this guy? For Christ's sake, flop his hair, make him a cosmic hobo, rough him up, make him zany." The concept of the cosmic hobo was born. The production team took this initial inspiration and ran with it. The concept of regeneration was not truly explained until many years later. In the Second Doctor's first story, it is referred to as a renewal, which suggests that the Doctor may have been de-aged by some mechanism of the TARDIS. But his physical appearance, and especially his personality, suggests that more than just a straightforward revitalisation of his body has taken place. Where the first Doctor had consistently been the dapper, well-dressed Edwardian gentleman with neatly flowing white hair, the new Doctor wore baggy and misshapen check trousers, held up by comical braces over a scruffy and crumpled shirt, collar eternally awry. A sagging bow tie was fixed at his throat with a safety pin, and around his shoulders hung a capacious and battered frock coat which had clearly seen better days. A scruffy mop-top completed the character's appearance, with early adventures indicating he had a penchant for unusual hats. He frequently carried a recorder on his person, which he would play when in deep thought, much to the consternation of Ben, who at first takes on the audience's role of being suspicious and doubtful of this strange claimant to the title of the Doctor. The first Doctor had at times been whimsical, giggling like a mischievous schoolboy when throwing spanners into the works of his enemies' plans, but overall he was stern and critical, moralising with his enemies at a moment's notice.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotion, sir?
The Second Doctor was altogether different. Complementing his dishevelled appearance, his was a character who seemed very aloof and quirky, almost clownish. His early stories in particular have him frustrating his companions by not particularly bothering to explain himself or his actions, seeming to delight in playing some elaborate practical joke on all involved. It becomes very clear, however, that this childish exterior is merely a clever smokescreen to lull his enemies into a false sense of security as his plans to thwart their machinations are developed and enacted.
There are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought.
Underneath it all, this is the same hero audiences knew and loved, and Troughton's reveals of his darker, more serious and cunning side are some of the most memorable scenes in the series' history. Indeed, Troughton's incarnation of the Doctor is arguably of greater impact and influence than that of his esteemed predecessor. He has been named respectively as a favourite by no fewer than 4 of the actors who went on to play the part themselves, and shades of his character can be most appreciated in that of Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor,
You ain't seen nothing yet.
and Matt Smith's 11th, especially the bow tie.
Overly decorated. I don't like it.
Troughton met the unenviable challenge of proving the show could continue to evolve with a different lead, while still maintaining the core ethics and educational themes of the programme's inception. All of us owe him a great debt of gratitude, as it so easily could have all ended in 1966. Thanks to Troughton, we've had over 50 years of more adventures in space and time. Considering how highly regarded his Doctor continues to be, it's surprising to realise that his debut received a rather mixed response at the time, with some viewers complaining that he didn't seem right somehow. One respondent to the BBC Audience Research Department's survey of viewer reception to Troughton's first story went so far as to declare, "Once a brilliant but eccentric scientist, he now comes over as a half-witted clown." What I particularly enjoy about reading such responses is how similar they seem to the bandwagon comments one sees on social media every time a new trailer or announcement for the modern series is shared. This just goes to show that some people are never happy until something has been enshrined in lore as unassailable. Like its lead, the show had to change to keep relevant and engaging for its audience, some of whom would be encountering it now for the first time. An early decision made by the producer was to abolish the pure historicals. Whilst recognising that the draw of sci-fi and exotic aliens was far greater and promised more consistently healthy ratings, I've always considered this a real shame. The historical stories of the 60s are some of my favourite adventures. Whether it's the journey of Marco Polo, as expounded upon in my previous episode, or the blood-soaked danger of the Aztecs, the ideological conflict of the Crusades, or the sobering results of religious intolerance in the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, the historical adventures of the early Doctor and his companions have always been far more tempting to choose from the shelf to watch or listen to over a lot of the more generic space alien escapades of the time. What we get as a farewell to the early alternating format of the show is The Highlanders, a 4-episode romp which takes inspiration from Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped, where the Doctor arrives at the close of the Battle of Culloden of 1746 and becomes embroiled in the shameful exploitation of defeated Scots in the slave trade.
It's got words on it. With Charles, our brave and merciful Prince Royal, we'll greatly fall or nobly save our country.
Bah. Romantic piffle.
The Doctor throws the hat to the ground in disgust. Suddenly,
You pick it up.
Alexander has a claymore at the Doctor's throat.
Careful, like.
Jamie is holding a dirk to Ben's chest.
This story is particularly noteworthy for its introduction of Jamie, the second Doctor's most faithful and long-lasting companion.
You all right?
Yes, I'm all right.
What were you up to? Possible was easy. An unintelligent enemy is far less dangerous than an intelligent one, Jamie. Eh? Just act stupid. Do you think you can manage that? Oh, it's easy.
Despite being a Yorkshireman, Fraser Hines was cast as Jamie McCrimmon, a young Scottish piper. As with many companions at that time in the show, his character was originally only intended to appear in the one story, but the decision was made to make him a regular during production. Despite being only 22 at the time, Hines had already established a successful career for himself, including an appearance in 1957's A King of New York, alongside Charlie Chaplin in his last leading role. He had also worked with Troughton before, and the two very quickly developed a close friendship and working relationship, the warmth of which is clear on screen, and helped to make the team of the second Doctor and Jamie so successful and warmly memorable.
I'd still be very careful if I were you. Very careful indeed. Come on, let's go and join them. Come on, Victoria. You look very nice in that dress, Victoria.
Thank you. Don't you think it's a bit...
A bit short? Oh, I shouldn't worry about that. Look at Jamie's.
Hey, I'll have you know that...
Oh, aye. Come along. Come along.
In some ways, The Highlanders was already a relic of the early years of the show, even when it was broadcast. Hartnell's later stories had seen the first tentative steps of the programme's eventual evolution. With the War Machines, the TARDIS had returned the regulars to an extended stop in the modern day for the first time since 1963, seeing the Doctor battling a megalomaniacal supercomputer with an army of killer robots 21 years before Skynet was heard of. And Hartnell's last story, The 10th Planet, was the first to establish a format which would become so integral to his successor's era, the base under siege. This involves a military establishment, scientific research centre or colony, where the vast majority of the action takes place. The road trip style episodes of Marco Polo or The Keys of Marinus became mostly a thing of the past, in favour of a more detailed and complex central set, with a figure of authority, chief scientist, military governor, etc., against whom the Doctor comes into conflict in order to save the day and the rest of the cast from a marauding band of vicious, inhuman monsters. This was the era of the Yeti. The Ice Warriors.
Useless and unnecessary.
The Macro.
There's another one!
And the Quarks. But the first monsters to besiege the base?
What the heck? Tino! Is that you, Tino?
The Cybermen. They were not the first, and certainly not the last, attempt to reproduce the success of the Daleks, but unlike the many other pretenders to the throne, the Cybermen were based on an idea wholly different from that of the fascist pepperpots from Skaro. And yet similar to those iconic villains, an idea which captured something of the zeitgeist. They really originated with a man named Kit Pedler, a medical scientist who was hired by Innes Lloyd as an unofficial scientific advisor to the programme, in an effort to incorporate more up-to-date scientific concepts into the scripts, as opposed to the Dan Dare, Buck Rogers type of sci-fi fare that had typified a lot of the space stories of the first Doctor's era. The 60s saw a massive increase in the consumption of mind-altering drugs, both legal and illegal. This, in its turn, had a concomitant hysteria, as people feared the dehumanising effects of benzodiazepines such as Valium. What was most scary was that these drugs and their zombifying effect were not associated so much with long-haired anti-establishment hippies, but with so-called ordinary people, especially the sacred housewife who represented the stability and security of the home. People, by which I mean the patriarchy, wanted to brush under the carpet first the concept that a housewife could possibly be unhappy with the contemporary prison of the home and motherhood, and second, the idea that a woman might find her only escape from such tedium through psychoactive medication. And yet it was an open secret, as the Rolling Stones reflected in their 1966 single Mother's Little Helper, and Jacqueline Susan explored in Valley of the Dolls that same year. In the ascendant, alongside the fear of the dehumanising effects of little yellow pills, were the concerns over transplantation and mechanical prosthetics, which were experiencing major breakthroughs during the period. In retrospect, the science of heart transplants and prosthetic limbs are nothing short of miraculous to the sane mind, but at the time, these advances stirred deep fear and anxiety due to a perceived possibility of the loss of some essential humanity or soul in the process of extending lives by artificial means. Combine this with the typically American revolution of plastic surgery and other supposed ungodly means of altering one's essential truths, and there was a palpable fear of beings who looked and sounded somewhat human, but with all of their natural, essential humanity stripped away through the process of augmentation. This is the key ingredient to the success of the Cybermen. They are most certainly not robots. They are humans rendered into walking corpses by a process of improvement for survival that lost its original purpose somewhere along the line. This has been misunderstood at times in their subsequent encounters with the Doctor. Unlike the Daleks, they're not motivated by hatred and fear of the unlike. Their only logical purpose is to survive. All threats to this survival must be annulled, and actually their logical purpose is a twisted form of altruism. All others should be like them in order to survive and prosper.
Now, care? No, why should I care?
Because they're people and they're going to die.
I do not understand you. There are people dying all over your world, yet you do not care about them.
Technically, the Cybermen are aliens, originating from the planet Mondas, but it is no accident that this is the fabled 10th planet of our own solar system, a twin of our own Earth, but inverted. This may look a little comical and unrealistic on screen, but thematically it's quite poetic and powerful. To all intents and purposes, the Cybermen are us, or what we could become. More so than the Daleks, who personify fascist totalitarianism, the Cybermen are monsters which continue to be topical and relevant as we progress into an uncertain future full of dehumanising danger. It's not for nothing that their first appearance in the modern series made use of many of the motifs of modern social media and electronic devices which so distract us from the communities which surround our homes, constantly chanting about the need for upgrading.
Upgrading is compulsory.
And if I refuse?
Don't.
What if I refuse?
I'm telling you, don't.
What happens if I refuse?
Then you are not compatible.
What happens then?
You will be deleted.
After their first encounter with the Doctor, which led to his first death, the Cybermen went on to appear with his second incarnation no fewer than 4 more times over the next 3 years. Unlike the Daleks, their design was not immediately iconic, and they changed pretty much each time they appeared, retaining only certain familiar features. 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi has been very vocal about how fond he is of their original Mondasian appearance, and it certainly is a striking design, the central features of which have appeared in all subsequent iterations. To many fans, who can look beyond the sellotape holding together their helmets in some scenes, they are arguably never creepier than in this form. I think this has something to do with the blank surgical masks that are their faces, and the clearly flesh hands, which act as a constant reminder of the creature's origins.
You're robots!
Our brains are just like yours, except that certain weaknesses have been removed.
Their atonal voices are also powerful, contributing to that uncanny valley feeling of their almost but not quite human nature.
You wouldn't care about someone in pain?
There would be no need. We do not feel pain.
For whatever reasons, the Doctor's new recurring foes underwent a redesign for their subsequent stories. And if I had to choose one that I think is particularly noteworthy, I'd have to choose the tomb of the Cybermen. I'm sure for many fans, this choice of mine was probably predictable, but it's such a classic example of the Second Doctor's era, and of his greatest enemies, that it would be remiss of me not to select it as one of my favourites. As mentioned in the previous part of this series, many of 60s Who was destroyed by the BBC after copies for overseas sales had been made. The Tomb of the Cybermen was one such story thought lost forever, until its chance discovery nearly 30 years later in a vault in Hong Kong, of all places. In the intervening years, it had developed a totemic reputation as a masterpiece, which was impossible to live up to when fans finally got to watch the programme again. It's by no means perfect, especially the blatant Kirby wires visible in a later scene, but it is undoubtedly a classic of the era, and an early example of the show beginning to take influence from the gothic horror genre.
I will stand still! Please, breaking them!
It's essentially a reworking of the classic Mummy's Curse, with the story's villains being discovered and awoken from their long slumber in suspended animation in an ice tomb on the planet Telos. It features quite a lot of filmed material which adds to the cinematic atmosphere of the episodes, with some of the best examples of location work of the classic series, and of course the famous scene where the Cybermen emerge from their tomb, a 30-foot set built at Ealing Studios. The decision to make this story the opening of Season 5 meant that several attempts are made to reintroduce the show for new viewers. It serves therefore as a good jumping on point for audiences, and a good story to show that non-fan friend.
Oh, it's the TARDIS! It's my home!
The inclusion of the rather pathetic character of Victoria Waterfield as the new addition to the TARDIS crew, alongside stalwart Jamie, provides the opportunity to remind viewers of the Doctor and his character, with further details being added which develop his mythos considerably.
You see, we travel around him here through time and space. Oh, no.
In publicity material, the Doctor's advanced age had been alluded to, and the second incarnation's early propensity to refer to a 500-year diary had implied that he was blessed with a lifespan far longer than that of any human, but this is the first time his alien longevity is explicitly stated on screen.
It's true. You must be, well, how old?
Well, if we count in Earth terms, I suppose I must be about 400... Yes, about 450 years old. Yes, well, quite.
Like all great mummy stories, the tomb lies behind a series of fiendish puzzles and deadly booby traps, with only the timely intervention of the Doctor ensuring the scientific expedition's access to their ultimate goal. This begs the question, surely if the Doctor had chosen not to help, none of the events of this story would have taken place. A response to this is, of course, that the fiercely logical Brotherhood of Logicians would have gained access eventually, with the Doctor's intervention ensuring that the threat of the Cybermen and the dastardly scheme of the Brotherhood to make use of the metal giants to conquer and enslave is thwarted in its infancy.
We need your power. You need our mass intelligence. Are you listening? Do you understand me? Now that I have released you...
Either that or the Doctor gives them access because he thinks they all deserve an unpleasant fate as a result of their hubris. I think I prefer the former.
You belong to us. You shall be like us.
Viewing the story from a modern standpoint, it does have rather a lot of unfortunate ethnic stereotyping, with the three villains of Kaftan, Klieg and Toberman all implied to be of foreign origin, in contrast to the British or American, complete with laughable accents, crew of good guys.
You are paid to take orders, Captain Hopper.
Not impossible ones, I'm not. It's the fuel pumps. Some character has balled up the lot.
What?
Toberman, especially as the muscular black mute who eventually turns good, a la the noble savage of some notably dated Victorian adventure stories, is particularly offensive to a modern audience.
His strength will be useful to you down there. He must go down. Go down, Toberman.
However, Toberman's part conversion to Cyberman is the first time the series makes the body horror threatened by the Silver Machine Men explicit, with his arm being replaced by the cold steel of a cyber prosthetic during the adventure. Also of note is the touching moment when the Doctor comforts Victoria, who lost her father in the previous story, by sharing some tantalising details about his own family, and Troughton injects a palpable but underplayed enthusiasm for adventure that serves as a template for the Doctor's consistent sense of excitement for travel that lasts to this day.
I shall never forget him. Never.
No, of course you won't. But, you know, the memory of him won't always be a sad one.
I think it will. You can't understand being so ancient.
Eh?
I mean old.
Oh.
You probably can't remember your family.
Oh, yes, I can when I want to. And that's the point, really. I have to really want to bring them back in front of my eyes. The rest of the time, they sleep in my mind, and I forget. And so will you. Oh, yes, you will. You'll find there's so much else to think about, to remember. Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
The Cybermen are defeated at the end of the story, but the production team intended for them to return to menace the Doctor and our world once more. And it was not long before, like the Daleks before them, the country's children were sent scurrying to hide behind the sofa as a further redesign of the metal monsters from Mondas invaded the very streets outside their homes.
It's the Cybermen. We've just seen hundreds of them coming out of the sewers.
Just like his predecessor, the grueling production schedule took its toll on Troughton, and this, combined with its constant fear of being typecast, led him to decide to hand over the TARDIS key at the end of another 3-year stretch of exciting adventures. By this point, the show was in need of another shake-up to maintain audience interest, and it would arguably prove to be the biggest shake-up in the history of the programme, but more on that next episode. Suffice it to say that not only was the star moving on, but the rest of the regular cast and those in charge of the production team also espied an opportunity to move on. Meanwhile, 2 proposed stories to round off the 6th season of the show fell through at the early scripting stage, leaving a colossal 10-episode gap that needed filling. The writing duties fell to Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dix, of whom much more next time, and their task was not an enviable one. They had to conceive of an epic adventure which would be a suitable send-off for the Second Doctor and both of his companions before his replacements had been cast, and without that old favourite the Daleks being available to draw and maintain an audience over the 2.5 months the serial would be screened. By this time, Terry Nation wanted to launch the Daleks in their own spin-off, separate from Doctor Who, hence the repeated return of the Cybermen over Troughton's era. The result was a story that has experienced a rollercoaster of appreciation since 1966. One decade it's considered boring and padded, and the next it's enjoying an exalted position as an all-time classic. I must admit, I'm in the latter camp, and right now most conventional fan wisdom agrees. Long may this continue. The War Games is packed full of exciting and pacey adventure which continually subverts the audience's expectations, leading to some of the best and most shocking cliffhangers in the series' history. It's very difficult to summarise this epic, but here goes. The Doctor and his companions arrive on the desolate Western Front of the First World War.
One of the most terrible times on the planet Earth.
Quick, down there!
At first, everything appears to be in the same vein as the historical stories long since abandoned by this point. As the episodes progress, however, it is revealed that our heroes are, in fact, caught up in an elaborate reconstruction of several key wars chosen from Earth's history, including the American Civil War and ancient Rome, within distinct zones on an unnamed planet, and populated by combatants abducted from each respective era,
This whole place is divided into time zones.
who are either overtly or implicitly controlled and manipulated by an alien race keen on studying their strategies and styles of combat, with the aim of eventually using the research to invade and conquer the real Earth. With me so far? The way the early episodes slowly reveal the real story beneath the World War facade is excitingly tantalising, and the 10-episode format gives plenty of opportunity for Troughton to present a greatest hits of what made his Doctor so great. A scene worthy of note is where the Doctor uses the sonic screwdriver, first introduced in a previous Troughton story, to actually unscrew something.
There we are. And back it goes. Fantastic!
21st century Doctor Who writers take note. Worthy of particular mention is Philip Madoc, one of my favourite Who guest stars, who would go on to memorably portray the Victor Frankenstein-esque Solon in a later classic. Here, he plays the alien warlord with suitably quiet menace. There's always been a tendency for Doctor Who villains to be played very OTT, sometimes to great effect.
That power would set me up above the gods! And through the Daleks, I shall have that power!
Other times to hammy embarrassment.
My dreams of conquest!
But Madoc here underplays the evil heart of the story's antagonistic enemy to great and chilling success.
If he helps us destroy the Resistance, if his life will be spared.
Warlord, I have decided.
I hold you responsible for the success of the plan. Failure will mean death. To both of you.
If only his underling, played by James Bree, hadn't preceded his introduction by always mentioning his title in drawn-out monotone, like he was trying to shift something lodged in his sinuses via vibration, I think he'd be even more effective.
To the war, Lord!
Where the story really gets interesting is when the means by which the aliens travel and have abducted their lab rats is gradually revealed. First comes the sight of their strange, cupboard-like travel machines, which make a very familiar noise. Then the reveal of how they are so much larger inside than out.
It is like the TARDIS. Bigger inside than out.
This is then topped by the realisation that the aliens are being aided and abetted in their villainy by none other than a member of the Doctor's own race, who has shared with them his people's technology.
Run, Zoe! Run! Stop them! Stop them!
Another time-travelling member of the Doctor's people had been encountered before, a history-meddling prankster known as the Monk. But this was so long ago by this point for the vast majority of the audience to have completely forgotten of his existence, and his appearance revealed nothing more of the lead character's origins, other than establishing that the TARDIS was not the Doctor's own invention. In the war games, the peril presented by the aliens is so great, now they are equipped with time travel technology, that the Doctor has no choice but, in desperation, to ask for help from a higher power, that of his own people, revealed for the first time here as the Timelords. In doing so, his long flight from their justice comes to an end, and arguably this is the last time the audience can legitimately ask Doctor Who, and really not have anything concrete as an answer. The Time Lords have never been as brilliant or seemingly omnipotent as they are here. Perhaps for a new viewer, the hints and glimpses given by the 10th Doctor may have evoked a similar awe, but for those of us who have seen their later classic series appearances, where they become very underwhelming and bureaucratic, it was a little like trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear by that point.
The dickens is my gun?
Actually, I think one of Russell T Davies's best ideas was to erase the Time Lords from the show, so that they're only ever mentioned in awed whispers.
Oh, you should have seen it, that old planet. The second sun would rise in the south and the mountains would shine.
The simple fact is, the best conceptualisation of them can never truly be done justice, no matter how large the budget. It's not about the scale of their society or the sophistication of their technology. It's the fact that they are essentially gods, lords over the greatest power in the universe. Any visualization of such a concept diminishes them, much like how the originally proposed climactic scene of the film version of Return of the King, The Last Lord of the Rings, where the incorporeal Satan figure of Sauron was planned to take physical form and have a real dust-up with Aragorn, would have pretty much cheapened the thematic culmination of the entire saga. The Timelords of the War Games, however, have the benefit of being confined to the conclusion and represented by three characters who wear very simple garments. Whether it was intentional or not, their unadorned and unostentatious appearance only adds to their power. One gets the sense that they are appearing in this form for the purposes of the trial they place the Doctor on, rather than it being their natural state, much like how it is sometimes implied that the Doctor's appearance is but one facet of his being, a little like, if you'll forgive another Lord of the Rings reference, the Istari of Gandalf and Saruman taking the form of aged humans in order to walk the earth.
He looked like your dashing young gentleman friend, your lover even. Sure. But he is the Doctor. He has walked this universe for centuries untold. He has seen stars fall to dust. You might as well flirt with a mountain range.
Theirs is a society of observation, of non-intervention. They do not answer prayers despite having the power to do so. The Doctor presents his defence of his flagrant disregard of this law, and actually is marginally successful. His parade of alien menaces persuades the judges of the need to combat such evil.
We have accepted your plea, that there is evil in the universe that must be fought, and that you still have a part to play in that battle.
But his sentence is only mitigated to one of exile to Earth and forced regeneration. His appearance and personality was to change once more, and this time he would not have the TARDIS to escape with, the Time Lords having blocked his understanding of time travel, or companions to ease his transition.
The time has come for you to change your appearance, Doctor, and begin your exile.
Is this some sort of joke? No, I refuse to be treated in... What are you doing?
As the crumpled cosmic hobo spun away from the screen, his face dissolving into a haunting blankness, his era and that of the 1960s came to an end. When he next returned, everything would be different.